So what is the point of studying Usul al-fiqh? That's the question Sheikh Abdul Hayy ibn al-Siddiq al-Ghumari asks in his treatise Naqdu Maqal. This is the fifth session of Madrasa readings in which we explore the curriculum and pedagogy of madrasas across North Africa. And this is also the topic of our academic study, which will be published next year, inshallah. We have already briefly explained what the study and what we study and how we study mantiq, fiqh, tajweed, mustalah al-hadith. And today we are going to discuss another pivotal discipline in the training of fuqaha, scholars of the Islamic sciences, specifically jurists or fuqaha, which includes usuliyin as well. I'm going to simplify the framework of this discipline known as Usul al-fiqh, its content, the way it is studied across traditional madrasas, at least those I attended. I will also reflect with you little on my own experience, my humble journey with Usul studies, and share some insights into the different stages on studying Usul in madrasas versus academic institutions, and to what extent I see it as useful today. So, Usul al-fiqh deals with sources, al-masadir, upon which Islamic law is based. Put simply, there are two levels of legal matters. The first level consists of clear rulings established by direct textual evidence, where there is no divergence in interpretation. For example, aqimus salat, establish prayer. Prayer is obligatory, and there is no disagreement among Muslims on this. In general, they agree that as-salat, iqamat as-salat, fard. And the second level concerns rulings where there are disagreements in interpretation and the techniques used to derive them, istinbat. This level is discussed in fiqh. We already discussed this, and this level covers the 5 legal rulings, الأحكام التكليفية الخمسة, الواجب والمندوب والمباح والمكروه والحرام. Knowing that some scholars expanded these to 7 by adding الرخصة والعزيمة والصحيح والفاسد, so you can find that some references talk about 9 instead of 7 or instead of 5 rulings. Well, to determine the specific ruling of actions, our actions from daily life to family, social, and political issues, al-faqih must understand how rulings are taken or derived from the al-masadir, from the sources. And that system is known as usul al-fiqh. You already know al-fiqh. Now, usul, plural of asl, refers to foundations. In the same way that mustalah al-hadith or usul al-hadith trains us in assessing the authenticity al-sihha of texts, usul al-fiqh trains us in interpreting them from multiple angles, including reason, language, there's circumstances of the text, and the conditions of its application. Usul al-fiqh, interestingly, is a distinctly Islamic discipline. It's an Islamic discipline in the way it is used. However, it's not fully an Islamic discipline in its origins. I have already discussed this point, the origins and the crossroads of Usul al-fiqh in different occasions. Um, in 2024 and 2025. So I discussed the connections between Islamic legal theory, for example, and Greek Hellenism. And in that presentation, I spoke specifically about the lectures of Margoliouth, who was an Orientalist who lectured in the 1940s at the University of London, and who critiqued Islamic legal theory and Usul in particular. And also I also discussed the connections between Greek thought and the paradigm of free thought in Islamic intellectual in the paradigm of reasoning in the Maliki doctrine in Europe, specifically in Europe. And most recently, the impact of these intersections in promoting free thought in Islamic intellectual history, and how to benefit from that in contemporary discourse. We may return to these events later. Now we move on and say that it's generally believed that it was Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i who was the first to have written a complete book on أصول الفقه. أول من ألفه في الكتب محمد بن شافع المطلب وغيره كان له سليقة مثل الذي للعرب من خليقة. أول من ألفه في الكتب. So this is a risala according to the the Sunni perspective. Shafi'i is the founder and the first author of a complete book in Usul al-fiqh. There are other theories regarding the founder of the discipline and the first book written on Usul al-fiqh, but this remains the dominant opinion within the Sunni tradition. After the early, say, 8th century, fragmented works on deriving new rulings from the sources of law and can be studied or can be found and discussed. And then the discipline Usul al-fiqh became increasingly structured and systematized. And later we find, here I'm oversimplifying things, maybe I'm just going briefly through the historical background of Usul al-fiqh. Later we find two main methodological schools, طريقتان, المتكلمون and الفقهاء, each with its own approach to writing, debating and teaching Usul al-fiqh. So the purpose, we're getting back to Abdul Hayy ibn al-Siddiq. The purpose of this discipline is to originally is to generate new rulings using the sources, masadr of law. And these sources, as you know, are primarily the Quran and Hadith. Quran and Hadith. And from these two comes al-ijma', the consensus of qualified fuqaha on certain opinions. And qiyas, or analogy, in simple words. Qiyas is analogy. Well, there are dozens of questions and detailed discussions concerning each of these sources and how they should be used together in order to arrive at a hukum or ruling. And beyond these four sources, al-Quran, wal-Hadith, wal-Ijma' wal-Qiyas, each madhab, each school of thought, I'm not referring to schools, al-Madaris, institutions, So each madhab is further distinguished by additional sources and legal maxims, قواعد, and reasoning techniques, استدلال, known as or discussed in Usuli books as المصادر التبعية. المصادر التبعية. There are also many works on the history, terminology, methodology, and reform of this field, but we want to stay focused on what is actually studied and taught in North African madaris. Right, in the majority of madaris, students study 2 to 3 books in depth. The first is al-waraqat. Al-waraqat by the star of Usul al-fiqh, Imam al-Haramain. Imam al-Haramain from the 11th century. This is the copy I have here. It's not the best though. I don't have my original copy I used back in 2007, 8, and 10. This one is good, but there are a couple of typos and mistakes we'll discuss later. So al-waraqat, and after al-waraqat they take مفتاح الوصول مفتاح الوصول إلى بناء الفروع على الأصول by Sharif al-Tilimsani from the 13th century. This one is my copy, and with all the glosses and comments. So المفتاح الوصول and then سلم الوصول. سلم الوصول by Muhammad Abd al-Rahman al-Disi from the 19th century. This is actually النصح المبذول. This is the commentary of al-Disi on his own novel. I believe that the book was edited a couple of times. This is not the best one. I got it as a gift, but it has several issues. Right. So after let's go back briefly to al-waraqat. Al-waraqat, which literally means the pages or the papers. It's a short prose text that became the foundational entry point into the study of Usul al-fiqh. It introduces the Usul al-fiqh, or what each chapter of Usul covers, and students memorize it word for word. تحفظ الورقات, the prose itself, and teachers usually explain it using commentaries such as قرة العين by الحطاب الرعيني from the 16th century. هذه القرة, this is قرة العين with الورقات. And yes, interestingly, but not surprising, that al-Malikiyya study a text authored by a Shafi'i scholar, since the three schools, al-Malikiyya, wal-Shafi'iyya, wal-Hanabila, share a common approach to usul known as al-Mutakallimun approach, in contrast to al-Fuqaha approach, which is represented by al-Ahnaf, by al-Fuqaha al-Ahnaf. Personally, I took al-Waraqat with al-Qurra in 2010 with two Algerian professors, Dr. Nadir Hamad, I will mention him later, and Dr. Abdel Karim Mqidish. Some madrasa, however, teach poetic compositions based on al-Waraqat instead of the original prose. And some teach نظم العمريطي. It consists of around 200 verses, and others study a shorter نظم, هذا سلم الوصول, 99 verse poem of DC. And I did not study al-Imriti, but rather a DC, maybe because he's Algerian and because he's DC, um, like my grandmother, whose name is a DC. Um, so these works largely cover the same content of الورقات, أعمال حول الورقات. Though for many students, um, um, المنظومات are more accessible and easier to memorize. وإنما رغبت في النظام لأنه أحرى لدى المرامي, as we said in النابغة. And also the flexibility and well, all the features of Nazm I discussed in the recent webinar I shared on where I compared the Nazm, the didactic poem, with Andalusian poetic genres such as al-Muwashshahat and Asjal with the University of Exeter. So you can just refer to that work to revise the benefits of Nazm and also to benefit from other genres which are more creative and flexible actually. I should add that before al-Waraqat, students are gradually introduced to Usul through the fiqh textbook al-Murshid al-Mu'in of Ibn Ashir. It includes a very brief introduction to definitions of key concepts that are vital for studying fiqh, and later Usul. Some madrasas also add this short textbook, إيصال السالك في أصول الإمام مالك by Muhammad al-Walati, a very concise introduction to the principles of the Maliki madhab. And this text was also taught by Algerian scholar Dr. Nadir Hamadou back in 2009 or 2011. And Dr. Nadir, probably have never talked about him, but one of my favorite professors for 1 or 2 years, has made significant contributions to Usul al-fiqh. I even once heard Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya says that Dr. Nadir's edition of Mukhtasar ibn al-Hajib is the best, Mukhtasar al-Usuli. Right, after al-Waraqat now, what do we study after al-Waraqat? Many madaris teach Miftah al-Usul. Miftah al-Usul is truly a masterpiece in the way it's written, especially because it uses concrete examples. It's very rich with examples, تطبيقات, which makes it an excellent manual for training beginners to apply principles in legal judgments. That's actually literally the title of the book, or the heading or the subtitle, إلى بناء الفروع على الأصول. Right, this stage is meant to prepare the talib or the student for the mutawwalat, the longer manuals in Usul al-fiqh, which are usually studied in other institutions rather than in madrasa. Well, interestingly, some madrasas do teach al-maraqi al-Saud, which is the versification of Jam'u al-Jawami' by Subki. A work that the Jam'u al-Jawami' هذا is an encyclopedia of Usul. It summarizes 100 books in the field. Al-Maraqi consists of 1001 lines I'm aware that in the southern parts of Algeria, Morocco, and Mauritania, there are طلبة who instead memorize الكوكب الساطع of al-Suyuti, and a few who memorize both actually. I did not study كوكب الساطع, but I studied al-Maraqi with several teachers, specifically through نثر الورود by الشنقيطي and نشر البنود written by the same author of al-Maraqi, الحاج عبد الله الشنقيطي. Another reflection or memory with Usul al-fiqh is that my first teacher, Sheikh Muhammad bin Abdul Karim, from the southern Algerian madrasa system in Ain Saleh, who was a student of Muhammad al-Zawi, rahimahullah, himself a student of Muhammad Malik, a student of Mullah Ahmad al-Subai, Tahiri. Sheikh Muhammad introduced me to my first book in Usul actually in 2007. And this was right after very basic texts like Al-Akhdari, and whilst teaching me Ibn Ashir. And the book was Usul al-fiqh by Muhammad Abu Zahra. This one. And I read it eagerly. It's a very beautiful book. Looking back, I think this was a wise move on my teacher's part, especially since I was heading to university that time, that same year. So he may have taken into account that I had completed a degree in literature, so a contemporary text might be better for a young university student. And this experience raises an important question: what is enough in Usul al-fiqh? Where should one stop after basic madrasa training? And most importantly, what is the point of studying Usul today? Especially when it's often argued that it has had little practice, practical application for a long time now. Back to Professor Nadir Hamadu. He commented on الورقات and إيصال السالك في جامع الأمير عبد القادر. And then something interesting happened. One of our professors there in Algeria, Dr. Mohammed Samai, popularized Maraq al-Saud by quoting it repeatedly over 2 years while teaching us multiple subjects, fiqh and usul, qawaid fiqhiyya. He later sat down and commented on extensive portions of Maraq al-Saud. And thanks to him, I became deeply attached to al-Maraqi as early as 2010. Later on, I noticed that Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya frequently cites Maraq al-Saud whenever I attend his lectures or read his books. Right. Another interesting note now. It was in Algeria, and thanks to Algerian scholars such as Dr. Samai, we were introduced to Moroccan scholars such as Dr. Mohammed al-Rougi. أشهر من نار على علم, whose classes I attended on several occasions in Morocco. And then in Sousse, والشيء بشيء يذكر, I attended a few sessions on al-Miftah with Sheikh al-Faqih al-Murabbi Sidi Abdullah Rayis in Igdi. And then in Faz, we studied Miftah al-Usul in full, followed by portions of جمع الجوامع and الموافقات القرويين, as well as the entire أصول القصار. أصول القصار, I don't have it here, but it's a very interesting book, Maliki book. I had delightful discussions in the home of the books editor, Sidi Ahmed al-Boushikhi. Right, what else I can tell you about um, Usul al-fiqh study? Well, I repeatedly attended the lectures of Allama Muhammad al-Tawil and studied his treatise on the features of Maliki Usul. In 2013, maybe before, in SUS again, I had an individual session with one of the lesser known but very solid alim scholar of the region, Sidi Mahfouz Grihin from Disney, and I still have his comments written on al-Tulayha or Butlihiyya. This is my copy on which I put his comments. I hope one day we can publish that. So Tulayha or Butlihiyya is a work that contains important elements of Usul within the Maliki madhab, particularly on ijtihad and fatwa. Right, I think this is pretty much. And I also spent a couple of months around 2014 with Sheikh Abdullah Addoud, the son of the great scholar Muhammad Salim Addoud, in Morocco, and I studied few parts of al-Maraqi with him, alongside يا ربي قطر الندى. Right, outside of madrasa system, just a parenthesis here, we had selective readings. في الجامعة, at the university, we had selective readings, قراءات مختارة from مسودة آل تيمية, parts of روضة الناظر ابن قدامة, and a course on comparative الأصول المقارنة, أصول مقارنة, comparative أصول الفقه. It was taught by Dr. bin Qasim Hadid. So university lectures. Later in Morocco, I also attended Raisuni, Ahmed Raisuni, and Mustafa bin Hamza, and others. So now, what is studied in madrasa for young students is, in my view, sufficient. الورقات, المفتاح, and then المراقي, هذا يكفي. This sequence allows the student and the researcher to develop a nuanced understanding of at least Maliki heritage and the mutakallimun approach to usul, with the terminology and tools provided by these books. You can read almost any text. الورقات, المفتاح, المراقي السعود. After al-Maraqi, I don't think one needs the constant presence of a commentator or a sheikh to benefit from al-Luma' by Shirazi, or to enjoy reading al-Bahr al-Muhit of al-Badr al-Zarkashi, or to wander through al-Mahsul by al-Razi. Some guidance may be helpful, of course, but a smart and open-minded student equipped with critical thinking skills and strong linguistic tools can dive into the mutawwalat. At this stage, we can say that صحبة الشيخ مستحبة وليست واجبة. مستحبة وليست واجبة. Now, remember the question raised by Abdul Hayy ibn Siddiq at the beginning of this session. he adds, to answer his own question, what is the point of studying Usul al-fiqh, that there are two purposes of Usul. First, he says, is to derive rulings through the principles and sources of Islamic law. Let's call this ijtihad al-mutlaq or al-akbar. And the second is to identify the strongest opinion, tarjih, to identify the strongest opinion among the various views studied in comparative jurisprudence. And let's call this ijtihad asghar or muqayyad or juz'i. These words are used sometimes interchangeably. He then argues that both of these levels, نوعين من الاجتهاد هذا, he then argues that both of these functions have largely disappeared. انقرضت, ذهبت, اختفت, رفعت. According to him, to Sheikh Ibn Siddiq Abdul Hayy, students and professors today rarely engage in any form of ijtihad. Instead, they mostly memorize earlier opinions and seldom apply the principles they study to real life situations, like someone studying Arabic grammar and then placing a nasb on the subject and on fa'il and the rafa' on the maf'ul, on the object. So the question becomes, why do Muslim students and professors spend years studying Usul al-fiqh? Which is a good question. Although he was addressing Abdullah Gannoun in his treatise, he was addressing Al-Allama Abdullah Gannoun in particular. But his concern actually echoes a much broader global issue in Islamic studies and education in general. The answers he proposed to his own questions remain unsolved or unresolved in our time. المشكل ما زال قائما. So the solutions the answers he proposed remain unresolved in our time. As long as genuine ijtihad remains largely absent in practice. لا يوجد اجتهاد بالمعاني التي قدمها وتحدث عنها. So should we continue? I'm just pushing forward the questions of Ibn Siddiq. Should we continue teaching Usul al-fiqh merely as a gateway to longer and more complex books instead of using it fully for the very purpose for which it was originally formulated, and it's وضع أصل وضعه. So thinking about this, I went back to the very definition of usul, especially the one given by al-Baydawi, al-Imam al-Baydawi, and others actually. The definition which says أصول الفقه معرفة دلائل الفقه إجمالا. أصول الفقه is defined as معرفة دلائل الفقه إجمالا وكيفية الاستفادة منها وحال المستفيد. معرفة دلائل ومعرفة كيفية ومعرفة حال المستفيد، كلها صحيح. معرفة دلائل الفقه إجمالا وكيفية الاستفادة منها وحال المستفيد. That is approximately in English knowing the foundations of fiqh, how to use them, and knowing the characteristics of those who benefit from those foundations. Knowing the foundations of fiqh, how to use them, and knowing the characteristics of those who benefit from those foundations. I have already discussed this Halul Mustafid in a separate video some time ago, and I find it really interesting. Halul Mustafid. which focuses on the nature or the status and conditions of the human being who engages with these foundations, هذه المصادر وهذه الأصول. His nature and status. Because the foundations consist of texts, language, techniques, paradigms, and patterns of thinking. And this part of Usul al-fiqh, this chapter, حال المستفيد, is discussed less frequently, partly because it usually appears as at the end of Usul manuals, and partly because it is rarely practiced in real life. حال المستفيد، من هو المقلد، من هو العامي، من هو المفتي، من هو المستفتي إلى آخره. And partly because it's largely absent from public discourse. We don't discuss this much, let alone being rediscovered and reinterpreted in a contemporary and broader context. There is a huge gap here on حال المستفيد. So what do we actually find in the chapter on حال المستفيد في كتب أصول الفقه, in the books of Usul? In concise summaries such as الورقات والمفتاح, we read about the prerequisites for engaging with texts, with النصوص, and the conditions of ijtihad and taqlid. But if in more extensive and comprehensive works, and in books specifically devoted to ijtihad, taqlid, fatwa, and all these are usul fiqh still, in the ethics or etiquette, all these books are works around usul al-fiqh, even if they are separate treaties or letters, such as al-faqih wal-mutafaqih, al-khatib al-Baghdadi, or adab al-fatwa wal-mufti wal-mustafti, al-Nawawi. If we read through these books, we find dozens of valuable guidelines. Those works address the moral, psychological, and cognitive states of the various people who engage with legal sources, the qualified mujtahids, the muqallids, and the general public, al-awam. They also discuss relationships between the talib, the al-bahith, the seeker of knowledge, and their teachers, between the teacher and knowledge itself, and many related ethical and intellectual sensibilities, مسائل أخلاقية وذوقية في كتب أصول الفقه. They are fragments, they are very small sections or paragraphs or sentences, all of which are deeply worthy of exploration from both pedagogical and anthropological perspectives. Let's read this line from Ibn Najjar. Ibn Najjar in his شرح الكواكب شرح الكوكب المنير شرح الكوكب المنير لابن النجار. In the chapter on the conditions of the mujtahid, he says, أن يكون عنده سجية وقوة يقتدر بها على التصرف بالجمع والتفريق والترتيب والتصحيح والإفساد، فإن ذلك ملاك صناعة الفقه. هنا ملاك. أن يكون عنده سجية وقدرة يقتدر بها على التصحيح إلى آخره. He must have a natural aptitude and strength that enables him to combine and differentiate, to organize, and to judge what is sound and what is unsound. This is the essence of the discipline of jurisprudence. صناعة الفقه. And then Ibn Najjar quotes al-Ghazali. قال الغزالي: إذا لم يتكلم الفقيه في مسألة لم يسمعها ككلامه في مسألة سمعها فليس بفقيه. إذا لم يتكلم الفقيه في مسألة لم يسمعها ككلامه في مسألة سمعها فليس بفقيه. If a jurist treats, approximate translation, if a jurist treats an unfamiliar issue differently from one he knows, then he is not truly a faqih jurist. And this uh, emphasizes the importance of being aware of the circumstances surrounding any issue, not merely knowing the text under which it falls. And these circumstances can relate to virtually any aspect of life, which means that jurist is strongly encouraged to have at least some knowledge about everything. Issuing a general fatwa, for example, on music, for instance, without minimal understanding of musicology would be absurd. So this is the point of this chapter, حال المستفيد. So across the pages of Usul books, not necessarily just the manuals, but the broader field, we find fragments and indications of ethics. Usul al-fiqh there engages with the ego, with the human desire, with the awareness, with intelligence, behavior, accountability, and in many ways provokes curiosity and sharpens critical thinking. In other words, this chapter on Halul Mustafid, which covers ijtihad, taqlid, fatwa, etc., whether found in usul books or independent texts, prepares students and researchers for the study of sociology, anthropology, and psychology. So, what should one study at the faculty or higher institutions after al-maraqi stage? The disciplines can include Islamic philosophy, Western philosophy, both classical and modern, profound study of Arabic literature, al-adab, adab and poetry, world history and worldviews, linguistics, arts and art history, academic inquiry and writing, sociology, psychology, and so on. And together, these fields will solidify your thinking and deepen your understanding of religion, worldview, and society, though they do not guarantee any specific career path. In the introduction of his أصولي جام مفتاح الوصول في بناء الفروع على الأصول, الشريف التلمساني says الحمد لله الذي خلق الخلق ليبرهنوا عليه. الحمد لله الذي خلق الخلق ليبرهنوا عليه. This is the first sentence in his book. الحمد لله الذي خلق الخلق ليبرهنوا عليه. And this echoes the famous note of Al-Ala al-Samarqandi from the 11th century that Usul al-fiqh is a branch of Usul al-Din, theology. And this can serve as a helpful point to reflect on Abdul Hay's concerns about the role and the relevance of studying Usul al-fiqh in our time. It should not be studied solely to generate new knowledge, new rulings. Rather, it forms a piece of the larger puzzle of ma'rifah. It serves as a window for those interested in the holistic philosophy of existence and questions on truth, values, faith, and knowledge. Are usul scholars, هل علماء الأصول, are usul scholars able to engage with these kinds of discussions today? This is the question. Mastering this mechanism, usul al-fiqh, protects young Muslims from narrow narratives and violent ideologies, while also helping non-Muslim researchers from more balanced, form a more balanced perspective on the study of Islam and the Muslim world. Thank you and salam.